We are moving through the series, Look Again, and so what we're doing is looking back at the Easter story and kind of taking a peek at the characters that we've heard of or read through multiple times, but never put ourselves in their shoes. And not so much the ones that we see repeatedly, but maybe the little lesser known ones or the ones that we don't hear about quite as often. And so this morning, we are going to look at a character within Jesus' kind of trial scenario. But before we get to that, the first thing I have to do is I need y'all to answer a question for me in a few minutes. So I'm going to ask it now so that the world of YouTube can catch up with the 30-second delay and everything. But when is a time that you have been really excited for something or to meet someone, and then that excitement came and that meeting was like, it's all right. So you ponder that. And those of you on YouTube, you got to be able to write it in the stream, because what will happen is everybody here is going to be like they were in first service, is nobody will say anything right now, but then after the service, then you'll all tell me your stories. So you have to type them online so I have something to actually read. So YouTube crew, please do that. Tanner is right. We broke the 200 barrier. It's crazy when you look back and you go, hey, we're 50% of what we used to be a year ago. But incremental. This morning we're going to look at Herod. So within the scope of Jesus, we've taken a look at Simon the leper and him creating an opportunity, him being one that has lived outside of community, creates an opportunity for community where Jesus is anointed with an oil that will then carry him through the next week. Some of us miss that concept that Jesus gets oil poured over his head that's very fragrant, that would then be the smell that he has during his last breaths, that very expensive perfume. And then we move forward and we talked about Annas and specifically Caiaphas, that many of us find ourselves within those shoes of the high priest, where we have weight and pressure from so many different angles to make the right decisions many times. And this week we're going to jump in and look at Herod. So I'm going to pray. We're going to read 6 verses at the beginning part of Luke 23. And then we'll hear a few stories, and then we have some stuff for the board here. I invite you to pray with me. Spirit, I ask that this morning would be more than just a pit stop amidst the busyness of an already full weekend. I pray that we would acknowledge that the sun shines because of you and not for us to do things this afternoon. I pray that right now your voice would speak, that words written thousands of years ago would be more than just ink on a page or pixels on a screen, but that here you would make us receptive. Even in the moments that we don't feel like it, that you would pry away the disgruntledness or the angst or the anxiety that holds us captive, and you would help us to hear your voice. So Spirit, this morning I ask that you would speak. Amen. Luke 23. Verse 6, now on hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. So in the timeline here, we see Jesus is taken at Gethsemane, and now many of you go, did anybody ever think that he was camping? I should have done that sermon. I always thought he camped there, like people that camp, you went in Jerusalem, went from a town of Sioux Falls to a city of Minneapolis during the time of Passover. So you went from a few 100,000 people to a few million people for a span of a week to 2 weeks. And so there's no place to stay, nor does he have a lot of money, hence Judas being so grumpy all the time. And so he and the disciples, I think, were camping out in Gethsemane. That's why they kept going back and forth from there. And why it's like, hey, can you just stay awake a little bit longer? Well, it's not like they just went out there and were like, oh no, let's just hang out. That was where they slept. That's where they went to sleep. That's what makes it so much more interesting to say, hey, don't fall asleep yet. I just need you for a little bit. So he's in Gethsemane. He gets arrested. He gets brought before Caiaphas, Annas, and then Caiaphas. Caiaphas takes him to Pilate. We will cover Pilate and his wife in 2 weeks. And then Pilate, at this point, in kind of talking to Jesus, we get this. He hears that he was a Galilean, and when he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Now, why was Herod in Jerusalem? The Passover. He's there for the party. Whether you follow the customs or don't follow the customs, when you're an important person in the area, you go to places where people are so that you can be seen. This is any sort of politician behavior. When you need to be seen somewhere and there's a big party, you go. So Herod is in Jerusalem. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressed him in an elegant robe, and they sent him back to Pilate. And that day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they were enemies. Okay, I have no responses on YouTube. Y'all need to get cracking on things on YouTube. So give me a time when you wanted to meet somebody or there was an encounter or a thing you were going to do and you went and it was like, ready, set, go. My wife. Oh, yes. Anybody savvy to Jason Upman? Y'all ain't into the Christian worship underground then. This was like 2000, mid-2000s, and great worship leader. And you hear it on the CD, you go, man, that's really good stuff. And then you get there and you're like, that wasn't what I expected. Who else? She went first. She broke the ice for you. Miss Pay. So for those of you that couldn't hear, Paola is going to be one of those scientists that you read about someday where you go, oh my goodness, we knew her. So Pay went to go see one of those ladies in her life and went to a conference and it was like, Was it her demeanor? Was it that she wrote things that were really great and then it didn't really pan out, or? No time for you. No time for you and your cancer research stuff. I got something else. Who else? Yes, ma'am. Miss Phil.
Took my kids to see Captain 11.
Yes?
It was not real as it is on TV.
Oh.
He stepped on a little kid's hands when he was walking through the crowd, and he wasn't real sorry that
It happens. Anybody else have a bad Captain 11 experience? That was actually one that wrote in first service on YouTube. Took my kids to meet Captain 11, and when we got there, he was a total jerk. You go, well, okay. I grew up with Bozo, the Bozo Show, and the Grand Prize Game, and all that, so I didn't have Captain 11, but I think they're probably both just as creepy. Maybe not. Maybe you know Captain 11. I'm sorry if you know him. He's not a nice guy. Craig's like, he's not. Well, hey, made his moment. Who else? I'll take two more. Rich. Oh, yes, the burger battle. Downtown? Which was the best? You don't. Are you checking with her which one you like the best? Say it real loud so I can hear after nobody's. Chef Lance. Chef Lance burger battle. You go and you anticipate. We had that where here's one of those. off-the-cuff ad-lib moments. So Carrie and I get married, and we're young, and we have no money, and we drive up to Minneapolis to go for like a honeymoon, which was just stay at a hotel and then go to the Mall of America because you don't have anything. And we went to some fancy Napa something restaurant where it was super expensive, and the chicken came, and it was like a chicken breast. I was eating a lot of chicken in those days. A chicken breast, it was a chicken thigh with the leg like broken and sticking up like this. And her meal came and didn't even have any meat in it, and we ate it. And then on the way back to the hotel, we stopped at Dairy Queen and got chicken strip baskets and Blizzards. Forever remember that. Yeah, one of those like, it just wasn't good. One more?
Another food, like we went to the place where pizza was invented and where pasta was invented in Italy. Both total letdowns. Just have the American stuff.
For those of you that couldn't hear, they were in Italy, went to the place where pizza's home and pasta is home, and went and had it, and were like, I don't like it as good. Which is kind of like, have any of you eaten real street tacos? Like real street tacos? They are very different from Taco John's. I will just tell you that. And so that will either be a great experience or it will wreck you forever, because Taco John's will never be good again. Okay, keep those stories kind of in the front of your mind and that feeling, because we'll get to that in a little bit. All I got is Craig. Good morning, church. I'm really let down by the YouTube crew this morning. Now that we get to this morning, the question that I have for you is, who is Herod? What Herod are we talking about? Say it loud. King Herod. Is he King Herod? Is there a King Herod? Probably. How many Herods do you know of? 13 for sure? There's a lot of Herods. So tell me the first Herod that we encounter in the Gospels. Don't be shy. Who's the first Herod? He's a bit of a megalomaniac. He likes to be king. Herod the Great, the Luke 2 story. For our purposes, we're going to start here, and he's the beginning. For those of you that are nerdy historical buffs, Herod the Great ends his reign and dies somewhere between 4 and 3 BC. And I said it that way intentionally because time goes the other way in BC. It's not 3, 4, it's 4, then 3. And then he has some kids. So we have this son, and this son, and this son, and one over here that are pertinent to our story. Help me fill these in. How many other Herods do you encounter within the Gospels? Well, the one that we just read about. And I'll tell you, all of them are named Herod. Herod liked to have his own name for all of his kids' name, and then they had other names, and so we have this Herod is Antipas. Do we know anything about this Herod? Say that again. Yes! We just read that. Big things ahead of you, son. Big things ahead of you. Hey, are you going to preach for me while I'm gone? No, okay. For those of you that missed Dustin's sermon a couple of weeks ago, go back and watch it. He is in charge of Galilee. So Herod the Great was the king of Israel, sort of, underneath Roman rule, and it gets broken up into parts. So we have Antipas, who is in charge of Galilee. We also have an interaction with him and another famous character within the gospel story where he does something, beheads John the Baptist. And why does he behead John the Baptist? Yes. Who was orchestrating that? And who was his wife? It's his wife, Herodias. Yes. Now, I'm giving you all of this so that when you start reading through the Gospels, you can go, oh, that person. This is the person we're going to talk about today. We got to fill in some of these bubbles so that you know it's not them. I will tell you there is another Herod who is Herod Philip. Anybody know anything about Herod Philip? Yeah? No? The one that killed all the babies is Herod the Great. This is our Xmas Herod. Philip is the one that ruled. This is an area where we don't hear about very often. Herod Philip is the one that ruled north and east of Galilee. Oh, that's slimy. Herod Philip was also married to someone of note. He gets in trouble because he marries his brother's wife. Both were married to Herodias. That's why John the Baptist goes, "You took your brother's wife as your wife? That's not okay." So he cuts his head off. Filling in some pieces. North and east of Galilee, this is when he talks about, and they went to Caesarea Philippi. This is Sea of Galilee. You go north and a little bit over to the east. Not too far because then you just get into the desert. There is another one. Anybody know who the other one is? All three of these are mentioned in the gospel. Archelaus. Now, he doesn't last very long, but he is in charge of Judea. His reign is somewhere around 6 AD, and then he kind of disappears off the scene. I will give you the last one because it impacts a number of the other ones. And he has a super weird name. Aristobulus. And you go, I didn't read about that guy in the New Testament. No. That's his daughter. You can see how weird this family stuff gets. So his daughter is Herodias that marries his brother and then marries his other brother. This is starting to kind of sound like the Beverly Hillbillies a little bit, isn't it? He also has a son named Herod Agrippa. You find Herod Agrippa in Acts. Acts, when Herod decides to kill James, the brother of John. That is his son. This Herod Agrippa actually does things to the other ones to kind of get them booted out so that he can be in charge. This is Herod Agrippa the first. This is the beginning of Acts. There is a second that I won't cover really, that is his son, that is Herod Agrippa the second, that is the end of Acts. All of this to say, it gets really, really confusing, right? We're going over here to cover the one in charge of Galilee. Here's, for those of you that are watching online, Tim, will you put up the map first? And then maybe for the online crew, just make it a full screen. So you can look here and you can see the upper area that we are talking about is where Philip is at. This is the one that was first married to Herodias, who was his brother's daughter. And then you can see Antipas is in the middle, the Herod that we're talking about today. This is Galilee and the area that is just to the outside of Judea. And then you see Judea and Samaria in the middle. This is where Archelaus reigned for a while. And then eventually the Romans kind of took over and then gave it back to Agrippa. The next slide will be good for them. You can see the thing that we have on the board here. For those of you that are going, where does he get all this stuff? All of this has little scripture references in it. that if you go back and pull it up on YouTube, it'll be full screen and you can kind of see some of this stuff. But you can see how it kind of plays out. Now let's jump in here. Jesus goes to Herod Antipas, who is the ruler of Galilee. And now when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased. He had, the Greek says, exceeding gladness. He was giddy. He really wanted to meet Jesus. This isn't Herod going, Jesus. It's, I really want to meet this guy. He was excited because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. So what else does this tell you? It's a very obvious thing. They have not met. You saw the area in which he ruled, not very big, was also the area where Jesus spent the majority of his time in ministry, and they have not run across each other. So there is a little bit of expectation going on here. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. So Herod is looking forward to Jesus coming. He hears that Pilate's sending him over, and he kind of has that, maybe I get to see some tricks. Right? Yes. He wants to see something. He thinks something fun is coming. He's got the miracle worker guy, the guy that brings Lazarus up from the dead. He's got that one lady that was in my territory that had blood forever, and now suddenly she's clean, and those lepers over there. All of these stories start to come to mind. So he plied him with many questions. Plied is a really weird word because in the Greek it says, and with many, many words he questioned him. So this isn't just the, hey, so are you like the guy? This is a question, and 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 a question, another question, and then many more questions. And Jesus' response was, but he gave him no answer. Now here's the irony within all of these stories. He goes to Caiaphas and Annas, and Caiaphas says, you're the Messiah, right? Huh? Yeah? Are you? If you say so. He goes to Pilate. Same thing. But he answers him. He gets here to Herod, who is in charge of his area, and he doesn't say a word. Now you're the leader of an area. I mean, you're the tetrarch, entharch, whatever sort of title he has from the Romans, not king anymore. And suddenly this guy won't answer you? He doesn't say anything. Now we know from other sections that Jesus does not like Herod. They have never met, probably intentionally so, because who was John the Baptist to Jesus? Cousin. And did John the Baptist say anything that was untrue that got him killed? No. Is he kind of a creepy dude that took his brother's wife? Yeah. So, Jesus, in an encounter with some of the disciples of the area, some of the Pharisees in Luke 13, says, you tell that fox, and we read it fox in the English, because English language doesn't have masculine and feminine pronouns when it comes to things. So it's not a gendered language like Greek is. And he really says, you tell that lady fox. We have a way of using this same terminology when we talk about animals, specifically dogs, female dogs that birth other dogs. Jesus says that about Herod. Now just pause for a second and go, oh, I thought Jesus was such a nice guy and never said anything that was pointed. No. He goes, you tell that lady fox, no, I don't want nothing to do with him. So Jesus is clearly not happy. So what does Herod do? He asks him a question and asks him a question and asks him a question and decides, I'm done. Verse 10. He sends him to the chief priests and the teachers of the law who are standing there vehemently accusing him. Now the word vehemently here, I have never ever used that in any papers that I've written or in any sort of conversation. The Greek here means to stretch to its fullest. So think of a piece of taffy where you like take a bite and you pull it and it just keeps stringing along. Or that moment if you were a kid. Sorry, Emily had her mask goofed on her nose. It was kind of funny. You're that moment where your kids or you as a kid, and you get that you are stretching my patience so thin right now. Yeah? That's exactly what the phrase here means. That there is that moment where Herod goes, fine, you won't answer me? There you go. Sends him off to the Inquisition, and they start coming at him, and they just don't stop and don't stop and don't stop. Have any of you ever been like verbally accosted by somebody? What do you want to do? You best get out my face. I got some things I want to say. And Jesus goes, and they just keep coming. All the way to the point where it's about to snap. To the point, so then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. Who ridiculed and mocked him? Who started it? If you were a soldier, do you just get to do whatever you want? No. Herod decides, well, you ain't going to talk to me. You ain't going to show me any cool tricks. You ain't going to answer the crowd that's yelling at you. Fine. Thought you were the Messiah. Thought you had great power. Where you at? What's going on? He decides that he just turned his back. Now here's where my story was similar to Paola's story, where I had this author and guy, it was about 10 to 12 years ago, and I was doing the house church planting thing and reading all sorts of books, and we had all these models and things, and I had read a bunch of this guy's material, and he was within a couple hours, and I'm like, I'm going to go. So I get in the car, and I go to hear him speak, and I coordinate with whoever was in charge of his kind of itinerary to let me have some time afterwards to actually talk to him. And so I come with, first, I sit through the thing that he talks about, which is just the regurgitation of the books that I've already read. And so you sit there and you go, yep, and you're going to say this thing next, and then you're going to say this thing next. And so, like, you feel pretty good. Like, okay, I got that info down. And then afterwards, I meet him and I go, okay, we're doing this stuff in houses, and how do you handle kids? Like little kids and big kids, and how do we have everybody together? And like pragmatic questions of how do you really do ministry in the raw when you're all together. What we do is we feed our kids snacks or we ship them into the little kid area. Well, when you do church in a house, you have your kids with you. They're all around you. And so the things that annoy us in here are amplified times 10,000 only for the parent of that child. Nobody else really cares. But the parent of the child is like, you're driving me nuts. And everybody's like, I didn't really even notice. So I'm asking him questions about kids and questions about like practical things to change and what would you do different? You've been doing this for so many years. What do I do? And he gives me I don't know. I guess you just figure it out along the way. And I go and I get in my car and I'm like, I'm never reading a single one of his books ever again. He's such a jerk. I had all of this expectation. You were going to help me. You were going to give me like the knowledge that nobody else knew because I read everything already. And I got nothing. I was done. Still haven't read his last book. It's on my shelf. I had ordered it before, and then when it came, I'm like, no, thank you. I didn't throw it away, though, because the day may come. So what you should be asking is, how do we translate all of this feeling of expectation from Herod to us? How do we stand within Herod's shoes? Well, there's two things that are a little bit different for us, and then one big thing that we all have in common with Herod. The first struggle is some of us in here and some watching online are believers. We know the resurrected Jesus. We know the Sunday Easter Jesus. And so we have a glimpse into this scene where our struggle is we've heard things about Jesus. We've come to faith. We've begun to ask him questions, right? And then what happens when we don't get answers? Well, then we go to the other people that are the religious people and we ask them the questions that we have. hey, I was really wondering, this thing isn't going so well in my life. And so we start spreading out the possibilities. As we move throughout, then when we don't get an answer, when Jesus doesn't respond, then what do? We turn on ourselves. And we go, well, I guess maybe if I would have typed in the chat more when we were at home during COVID, if I would have actually paid attention and not done like 4 other things, if I would have went to church more, maybe I should have made sure the kids really paid attention in Sunday school. Maybe if I would have just given a little bit more of that stimulus money to the church, maybe if I would have done these things, then God would have returned my response. Which is the complete opposite of the gospel, that you have to actually do something to get something. His gift is free, but we ultimately come back and go, I didn't get my answer, so what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong because he answers, right? Not always. Or maybe, because don't disregard this, there are people within the congregation that have sat in the pews where you're at, and then maybe sat there for years and live in the world of, Jesus is all right, but I really just come here because they want me to. I mean, practically. I've done funerals where you go, was there any like Bible verse or anything? He didn't really. I mean, he had a strong faith, but really, no, there was no favorite verse. How do you have a life-changing experience and go, you know, of the 84 million words in here, I didn't really have 10 of them that I really liked all that much. We just kind of skate through because people haven't had that experience. And so we hear about Jesus. We come with our questions and we don't get an answer. And then what we do is rather than, well, maybe this is more of us in the faith world too, is we say, hey, Tucker Carlson, what do you think about that? Well, because Don Lemon, he thinks this. Well, and I was reading through here, and Ben Shapiro thinks this thing. And you know what? Lady Gaga, she thinks this. And we find all of the different people that our religious elite, and we ask them questions. And we try to find answers. And in the end, the struggle for people that maybe don't have faith, if you're in that place where you go, the Jesus thing is sort of, but I haven't got a good answer, then you're stuck with saying, well, it's God's fault. Right? God, why would you not answer me? You're supposed to be this all-knowing, all-loving, all of this stuff that's so good, and I come to you and say, I need to know an answer to this, and you don't answer? Seriously. I mean, pause for a second. We could probably have Paola come up here and give us a discourse on how many people with her and her family say, I'm not really sure about that. Have you looked at the Holocaust? Those were God's people. His people chosen throughout all time. And before you start saying, well, they didn't really believe in Jesus afterwards, no. But if his promise to them doesn't count, why would you believe yours? His people are his people forever. And many of them go, I didn't get an answer. I looked, I searched, and I got nothing. Now here's where we all find the same footing. This is where we all put the royal slippers on like Herod. It's because many of you just come for the show, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe we are really quite faithful. But you know, if the slide guy would have actually made it so Ken's head didn't walk into the box every single time he moved around, it would have made it a better experience. If the sound guy would have made it so that feedback didn't come up every once in a while, that would have been better. Well, you know, there was that one note. I don't really like that one song, that Loves Us song. Why did he say unforeseen whatever? It's sloppy wet. Why did he change the words? Right? Now maybe you aren't musical and you go, I really like it when Ken actually does something with an illustration and not with the stinking whiteboard all the time, because then we don't actually know the answers to his questions and he just stands up there and writes stuff. We come And then you leave, and I've had this many times where I'll stand back there and people go like, hey, great sermon. But there's always that part in us that wants the show to be a certain way. Now, this is the hard part. This is the hard part where we all sit in the seat as Herod. He comes to Jesus. Jesus comes and he's like, I'm really excited. I want to see something great. I've heard great things about you. I've had some experiences that maybe make me want to know more about you. And that's not what I expected. Because what our expectations are often make things a struggle here. Because we didn't come here to say, God, do something in my life. When I stand up before I pray each week, I say, God, press pause on all of the craziness of life and let me hear you. Why do I say that? Because your life is crazy. It really is. Whether it really is to somebody else doesn't matter, but it is to you. Because even when you're not busy, you feel too guilty to say that you're not busy to somebody who goes, so are you busy? Oh, I'm so busy. Really? Well, if I say I'm not busy, then I'm obviously lazy, right? We bring all of that in here and we sit in our seat and then we expect something to happen. If you're in first service, you go, well, the bells were okay this morning. Choir was a little off. That one song, just not really for me. We find our spot within the grand scheme and go, Jesus, I wanted a really great show. And maybe it's for earnest reasons. Maybe we have that experience where God shows up in a powerful way through a message, through a reading, through a whiteboard, through a song, through whatever, and we get it. Something clicks, and we want that again. But Jesus doesn't show up that way again. But we still expect it. Now the question is what do we do next? What do you do after you put the royal slippers on, expecting Jesus to treat you like a king, and you get your own expectations not met? You have to realize that this is Friday, and it is not Sunday. This is the Friday where Jesus has something very big ahead of him. And sometimes God's answer is not answering. Sometimes it says, just wait. What do you think would have happened to Herod had he waited just a little bit? Now, we don't know his story of what finally happened to him. But what would happen to you if you came each week not expecting to have a good song? Here's how you know. If you invite a friend, do you go, oh, I hope he doesn't do that thing? Right? I literally remember this of early in the days when we were at the crossing and the band was really good and you have that nostalgic thing in your head and you go, oh, I brought a friend. I really hope they do that one song because it's so good. Well, is that because I want them to have the exact same thing as me? Or do you show up and go, God, whatever it is, speak. Whatever the song, let me find reverence in that. Whether it be a hymn, whether it be a new song, whether it be a peppy song, whether it be a slow song. Whether the song completely bombs, maybe the sermon's not so good. But that your expectation is that God will show up and speak when He's ready.